Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'll just give a couple more minutes as people are still coming in. Okay, I'm still letting people in, but I think we can get started. Let's see. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Now, I just have to make sure I can still let people in while I'm sharing the screen. Okay. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is the follow-up meeting for the inaugural meeting of the Canadian Wind Energy Research Network. So today we'll start with a summary of the webinar. So I'll go over some stats, and then the moderators will go over some highlights of their session. And then we're going to ask you to fill out a survey using menti.com. And then, sorry, I'm just letting people in the room. Then we'll have a presentation from Tom Levy and Ryan Kilpatrick from NRCan to talk about research priorities and funding options. And then Phil McKay from CanRIA will present on bridging the gap between research and industry. I guess I should confirm first, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Okay, so as a reminder, we wanted to form this network because really nothing like this has existed in Canada since the completion of the WESNet, the NSERC Wind Energy Strategic Network. And what we're hoping is that this network will create a forum for collaboration as well as accelerate the uptake and impact of research products. Our initial plan is that the research network will hold at least one meeting per year. And then at these meetings, members with intersecting areas of interest would be encouraged to engage in joint research and to pursue external funding opportunities. The current plan is for this network to focus on megawatt scale wind turbine generators, but if there is interest, it's possible that we could expand the network into other areas. The steering committee that helped plan these initial meetings are Ryan Kilpatrick from NRCan, Rup Caravo and Lindsay Miller from University of Windsor, Cedric Arbez from Nergica, and then Eldridge Rebello, Scott Harper, and me from WeCan. And we also had a lot of help from our WeCan interns, especially with the initial meetings, Jeremy Cadence and Tim Jordan. So as a summary, the first inaugural meeting was a series of 6 webinars. We each were 1.5 hours, 1 hour presentations with a half hour of discussion. We had 45 speakers from 8 provinces. Some speakers gave more than one, they had more than one presentation. We had 88 attendees in total from 9 provinces and 2 territories. And you can see I have a breakdown for each of the webinars. The attendees were 36 to 50 for each webinar. And then this map kind of shows how we did have attendees or participants in this network from across Canada. So the cars represent where the steering committee is from. P is where the presenters were from. And then the purple kind of pointers are where we had attendees. And this table shows that we had representation from 22 universities. The bold blue font shows where the speakers were. We had representation from 8 industry, 5 government departments, and then 3 independent research institutes. Now I'm going to ask each of the moderators for the session to briefly summarize what the high points or the highlights were from their sessions. We can start with Ryan Kilpatrick. Are you there, Ryan? Yeah.
Yes, thanks very much, Marianne. Yeah, so just I'll give a brief overview about the sessions that I moderated. So starting with webinar 2 we held on March 24th. And so that covered a few of the IEA tasks, wind farm modeling and wind turbine aerodynamics. So Canada participates in 9 IEA research tasks currently, and we heard from 3 of these today. Jamie Baxter from Western actually presented on a different webinar, but I'll talk about it here. And then most of the other IEA researchers were interspersed in the other sessions. But in this one, Nergica spoke about their work on Task 32, which involves LiDAR for wind energy deployment in multiple areas, such as complex terrain, cold climates, as well as floating LiDAR and LiDAR-assisted control and forecasting. Nergica also spoke about Task 41 on distributed wind, including the value of distributed wind, advantages of combining solar and distributed wind, and their work on an upcoming CSA WEA standard for small and mid-sized wind turbines. And then Western University talked about Task 28, social acceptance of wind, where offshore wind is becoming an increasing point of interest, but also transmission lines and other balance of plant can play a big factor, not just the turbines. And there are emerging issues with regards to wind energy acceptance in the form of very large turbines, decommissioning and repowering, as well as with floating offshore systems. And then on wind farm modeling and aerodynamics, we heard from UBC, University of Dalhousie, University of Calgary, University of Waterloo, and University of Victoria. And some of the main points there were about upstream blockage and downstream wake growth. modeling wind farms in complex terrain, capacity values of wind farms in Nova Scotia, how the siting location can have a greater impact on capacity value than the maintenance strategy. We've heard a lot of discussion about smart airfoils, trailing edge flaps, winglets, vortex generators, modeling unsteady flow behavior with the goal of reducing load fluctuation. So some of the discussion we had from that session involved the commercial status of smart airfoils, the retrofit market, barriers to adoption, a lack of consensus perhaps on the value of some of these airfoils that still needs to be resolved. We talked a little bit about modeling specific terrain features in Canada with respect to load centers and geography, and some of the unusual features of complex terrain in Alberta. And then I'll quickly talk about the climate change session as well, which we held as part of webinar 5 on March 31st. And so in this one, WECAN presented on historical data sets and climate change, looking at wind speed changes at the WECAN site. The University of Victoria presented on climate urgency and the role of forestry. And then University of Alberta presented on wind energy's historic emissions displacement in Alberta, increasingly displacing coal. And then some of the discussion we had, we talked about some of the previous work done by NERGICA on impacts of climate change on wind energy potential. And in terms of going forward, there's a bit of discussion about some of the ongoing work on pathways for capacity of expansion of wind to contribute to electrification and climate change targets, potential studies on overbuilding of renewables, use of excess electricity for storage, electric vehicle charging, and then increasingly gaining traction are power to gas applications for production of hydrogen and ammonia from renewables and offshore wind demonstrations. So I'll turn it back over to you, Marianne.
Thanks, Ryan. Eldridge, can you summarize your sessions?
Yep, I'll just do the quick tech check first. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So my first session on grid integration was on the 26th of March. We heard from 5 different presenters. We heard from I won't mention everyone's name, I'll just mention who they were, which institution they were with. We heard from the University of Victoria. We heard from the Saskatchewan Research Council, the University of Alberta, us at WECAN, and NRCan. The same day, we had a second session about asset management, and followed by a discussion session where we heard from all our 5 presenters on the grid integration topic. The discussion was fairly interesting. That we ran into, we covered topics around access to data and making more of this information public. The forecasting discussion session was similar, and one of the highlights I'll just mention from there was the different various data sources available. One that was mentioned during that session was the exact name escapes me, but it was the Alberta Ministry of Agriculture, I believe, that has a number of weather stations around the province, and that makes this data public. And it's a good resource if you want for wind forecasting or energy output estimation. So with that, turn it back to you, Marianne.
Thanks, Eldridge. Roop, can you talk about your sessions?
Oh, I would love to. It was an exciting session on asset management. In fact, it was interesting because the space was far more crowded than I thought it was, which is good news for the industry, in my opinion. So things kicked off with an overview of our own sort of Enbridge, WECAN, and Kruger Energy, Western University, and University of Windsor Year 21 collaboration, which worked in energy in asset management for 3 years, and how that was being transferred now to apply and support IEA Task 42. And it led into our involvement in the digitization of life extension and asset management for Task 43. And in addition to that, We moved on from there. We had a few presentations surrounding those themes. And then we had inputs from our friends at the University of Waterloo. So Claudio Canizares and his group presented work on their multiple machine learning models for failure prediction. And then from Queens, we had Dr. Mashevsky, who had multiple projects underway that looked at wear and degradation detection for various components within the turbine machine. And then hometown boy Robbie Sanderson at WeCan provided some visual results demonstrating how the group at WeCan was using data to enhance operational capabilities. And then Majid Morshidazeta, also from WeCan, good U Windsor man, was talking about their efforts to advance condition monitoring techniques. Then we had updates on Energica's remaining useful life project. And Dr. Sun from University of Calgary presented some extensive results on their advanced fault detection and diagnosis model. And finally, we heard from Dr. Mashopoulos at Western, who led us through the development and applications of a comprehensive model that considers the electrical, mechanical, and aerodynamic aspects of wind energy systems. That's it from here, Marianne.
Thanks, Rob. Cedric.
Yes, so on the cold climate session, we can divide cold climate in icing and very cold temperature. And the main reason that we have some interest on this topic is on operation and maintenance issue and health and safety. So first we have some presentation from Energica. We work mainly in that. So because we have the mandate to manage the IEA Task 19 for the Canadian perspective. So we present first mainly the project and the ongoing study on that. Also, we have the session have two presentation on more operation and maintenance prediction or issue due to cold climate, especially icing, with two students from UQAR, the University of Quebec at Rimouski. Mr. Casual present from the University of Saskatchewan about cold climate issues, smart grid, and icing. Very, very interesting. We have some very applicated sensor from University Laval with André. And André also is now a company, have their own company. And at the end, we have a very interesting presentation from Enbridge about some vibration during icing events that you have a lot of questions, but we need to find more solution. And I'm thinking is the goal for future works to have more link with the science and the application on the wind farm. That's all for
Thank you, Cedric.
Yeah.
Lindsay, can you summarize your session?
I sure can. So in webinar 6, the topics were forecasting and offshore wind. So under the forecasting topic, we heard from our colleagues at the University of New Brunswick about their research efforts to improve linkages between wind speed forecasts and ramp events, and also about the integrated forecasting package they have developed for utilities and wind farms. Environment and Climate Change Canada and the University of British Columbia also provided presentations on their work to improve forecasting. Under offshore wind, we started off hearing about some preliminary work being carried out by the Geological Survey of Canada, including the assessments of the geology of Atlantic Canada with a focus on renewables. We then heard from U Waterloo and their work in differential power processing and offshore wind farms and the potential for improving conversion efficiency, and UVIC's research in combining offshore wind and carbon capture technologies. And then lastly, our group at the Environmental Energy Institute provided a summary of some outcomes from our Offshore's Renewable Working Group meeting, looking at some of the challenges and barriers that we're still facing, and also some of the drivers for offshore wind in Canada. So taken together, we had some exciting projects under these topics, but still much to be done before offshore projects are realized in Canadian waters. And that's it from here.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. So with that, and we jogged your memory of what the event was like. Now, I guess the next part of this session will be I'm asking you to participate in a survey to talk about what these inaugural webinars were like. And then following that, we'll have a presentation from NRCan and then Phil McKay. So I'm going to stop sharing this presentation and start sharing the Menti presentation. Can you see the presentation now, the survey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'll go through these questions and then I'm asking you, great, people are already responding. So the following topics were discussed at the initial meeting. Please select topics you would delete. And then there wasn't a way to add a write-in option. So if you would add any topics, you can either mention it verbally or in the chat function if you think that there's any topics we should have added to the session. So the topics were IEA tasks, aerodynamics, climate change, grid integration, forecasting, asset management, cold climate, and offshore wind. So I don't know, it's possible people think there were too many topics or maybe we were missing some important topic. And if anybody would like to weigh in on their thoughts of why something should be removed, or like I said, if anything should be added, please feel free. Oh, we have a couple of people saying topics should be added. Does anyone want to talk about that?
Marianne, this is Tom. I don't have any specific topics to add. I'm just looking at what Lucas wrote, and I mean, I think that I think the idea of priorities is a good one to try and figure out where efforts should be focused. My personal perspective is kind of looking at the notion of electrification, and then you get into the grid integration side of things. I feel like that's an area that will essentially need continuous research from a few different angles, and I think that would be of tremendous value. It falls in line with much of where we're seeing things evolve in terms of where the needs are, where the work is. If you look at some of the work that Lucas did and released last year, the power advisory work in Nova Scotia, the overall electrification push implies massive volumes of renewables that are operating not in the way we had traditionally expected them to even 10 years ago. It falls in line with where SREPS is pointing in terms of the need to ensure the provision of grid services is there, and how do we get there? I feel like that all dances around the grid integration question. And I think if we're going to go in that direction, then maybe a notion of markets and regulatory framework in which to do that. But that might be getting a little outside of the realm of the research network's scope. So I'll just put that out there for consideration.
Yeah, Tom, I agree with you. As you know, I like that topic as well. I was, for this session, I was kind of putting the market question in with grid integration because I do think they're related, but definitely, I think they're important topics.
Stephen here, if I can give a topic. I accidentally clicked the grid integration. I didn't mean to delete it. I want it kept actually. But in terms of something I don't see on here, might be, it kind of falls into grid integration, but I guess the power electronics part of the wind turbines and their interaction with the grid and what they can provide, and the inverters and stuff and whatnot, for example, is something specific within grid integration or another topic itself that I think would be very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. I think something along those lines would be valuable. I think Martin Pape was going a little bit in that direction, focusing on offshore wind, but definitely there could be room in that area as well.
Marianne, I'll point you to Daniel Martineau's comment, and I've spoken with Daniel a few times about challenges in challenges in the north. What works in the south may not work in the north, and are there special considerations? Certainly, getting down to minus 50 degrees C, plus the different higher levels, I guess, of erosion from the sun because of just the nature of the angle of the sun. I've heard can create issues as well, and so the idea of northern focused research is probably an area that's lacking.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. That was just the first question. So we'll move on to the next one now.
Marianne, before you do, can I just
Yes.
add that I support those arguments very strongly. With a lot of PV going in the north, wind can be an extremely useful backup for winter, for example.
Yes, definitely.
And maybe I think David commented on this, but the IEA Task 41 covers that topic. So it's somehow, I guess, hidden within that IEA task topic there that we do focus on smaller wind for the north. But it could be defined as a more specific topic for the group. And of course, Nergica, we have interest in this. And I think, with the projects we've had with northern communities so far, it's important, I think, for a lot of those communities that a technology solution exists in that specific market niche, I would call it this way.
Right. And I see Jamie added social aspects of wind energy development, which I think is pretty fascinating. And Amy's end of life cycle management of assets. I agree. I think that's a hot topic that we should be looking at more as well. So on to the next question, if I dare. So would you like to see this network continue to focus on wind, or would you like to broaden the scope to include renewable energy and energy storage? So right now we focused on wind. We were focusing on megawatt scale. We've already seen some people would be interested in looking at smaller wind, sub-megawatt. So yeah, the answers are coming in. It was looking pretty even, but. Does anyone have any comments here?
Sorry, Gareth here at Clear Renewables. So I've not been involved heavily in to date. I just similar answer here to the previous comment, like the breadth that you can go is very, very wide on these things. And I think I just come back to like the topics you want to cover, just come back to what the goals are of the group and what you want to achieve there, and being laser focused on that as much as possible there. So I think discovery sessions on the last the last topics there would be the big area I would focus on. And same applies here, like you could go really wide and go beyond wind, but there's just looking at the size of the group and what you're trying to achieve, it's how impactful is it going to be going too broad.
Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, I think that there's the risk, right, that you dilute everything. I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, Gareth. And at the same time, there isn't another farm that I'm aware of doing this kind of work in solar and storage as well. From an industry point of view, as we get into hybrid and co-located sites, where does that live, right? Where do those go? And so I definitely agree with needing to be laser focused. Otherwise, you don't actually get anything done. But then if you wrap in these other technologies, you've got to, I think big enough to have the breakout rooms and people who can manage different aspects of it so that they don't get lost, or one thing doesn't get inappropriately prioritized because of who was at the meeting that day versus the next day.
Right. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So this was obviously, it was a virtual meeting by necessity. Our original hope was that it would be in person, but we thought the virtual went well. But moving forward, would you prefer that this network remain virtual, or if COVID-19 restrictions are lifted, would you prefer the network to meet in person? And yeah, I'm seeing a lot of preference for a hybrid approach, and I can see that's kind of what I imagine moving forward. We're going to see a lot of that. Okay, for the next question, sorry if there's, yeah, it's a good point, Jamie. Hybrid is how the IEA tasks run, meet once a year in person. But yeah, so the next question, how frequently would you like to meet as a network? So we were envisioning at least once a year, but would every second year be good enough? Or should we meet more than once a year? And again, it would be, we could decide we're going to have one annual general meeting in person and then have smaller group meetings. There's a lot of ways that this could work. Okay, next question. So for this, the 6th webinar series, we're asking if these meetings were to remain virtual, were the time allocations adequate? So you can check all that apply. So meetings was 1.5 hours was just right. 1.5 hours was too short. 1.5 hours was too long. And then for each presentation was 5 minutes just right, too short, or too long. And then the discussion at the end, 30 minutes was just right, too short, or too long. And if anybody has any comments, please feel free to share. So yeah, it looks like most people were okay with the 1.5 hours. 5 minutes was pretty hard, I think, for people to get their presentations in time. Or not in time, but to get everything said that they wanted to. And then the discussion at the end. It looks like most people thought that that was okay. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So if it remains virtual, were the number of webinars? So we had 6 webinars, so it ended up being spread over 3 weeks because Good Friday and Easter Monday were there, but was 6 webinars just right? Should we had more, or was it too many? Yeah, and so Stephen, you commented you liked how they were broken up by theme. I think that was helpful. Like, so if you weren't interested in a topic, obviously you wouldn't feel obligated to go to that webinar. Next question. This is kind of asking for yourself as a follow-up. Did you see any opportunities for collaboration as a result of this network? And if you'd like to share any collaborations that have resulted from this network, I'd love to hear about it. It looks like a lot of yeses there. Can anyone comment on any collaborations? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Did you have any expectations for this meeting that were not met? And just to make sure it's clear to everyone, if you want to access this survey, you can go to menti.com and the code is 3723-4382. I think it's in the top of this presentation. If you have any expectations that were not met, can you comment on what you were hoping to get out of this meeting that didn't happen? Okay, the next question. What is your level of interest in connecting with industry partners? So not applicable, you're open to discussion, or you already have industry partners.
Marianne, this is Tom. I mean, I have industry partners per se, but from OERD's perspective, I think what's interesting for us, which will come up in my deck that we'll get to next, is this idea of trying to understand where the needs are, and ensuring that those are, distilled well within the department so that future programming can be oriented in that direction, and that's key. So, from my perspective, I'm very happy and would encourage people to reach out to me and the rest of the NRCan folks on this line, so that those people can explain what their needs are from their perspective, and understand what opportunities there might be, either current or in future, from a programming perspective to help address those. So I'm not looking for partners per se, although I think Steve might have a different perspective at the lab, but from an OERD perspective, getting that insight from industry is important, and this network and the work that Phil does and so on is critical to helping us understand that and ensure that programming is aligned with where the needs are.
Right. And so the next question, what are your expectations for the network moving forward? Are you hoping the network, and you can check all that apply here as well. So do you want it to be a source of collaborations, a source of funding, source of information, source of industry partners, other, or you have no expectations? And if you have other expectations that weren't captured, it would be great if you could share them. Yeah, Lucas's comment, a source of community, is important. I agree completely. It's great to talk about, talk to like-minded people. Yeah, and Stephen's comment, it would be useful as a way to collect input from collaborators, partners, and other stakeholders. I agree.
Just looking at Lucas's comment there, I think back to my CanWEA years when we had the poster presentations, and I know Scott and I have discussed those in the past. And Marianne, I think you were at WeCan when those were still happening, I believe.
No.
So, I mean, Luchen worked very hard. It was through Westnet, and Phil, I don't know whether those sorts of those sorts of opportunities may present themselves in the future, but absent NSERC, as Lucas is saying, this sort of space from an academic research perspective is important to maintain. Those poster presentations helped get it out there, what that work was doing, and what it was, the direction that the industry was overall going. You could get a sense from those posters. So maybe something like that in the future, when we're allowed to travel again, will be something CanREA could help look at again, or otherwise another outfit, like maybe through this in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah, a really good point, Tom. And that's to my comment in the chat as well. I think this group can fill part of that void that we have right now, because it was also noted in the chat that, yeah, I mean, doesn't always fit with the commercial conferences, right? With the trade shows and the other solely industry focused events. And we want to make sure that it's a place where we can get this information out there. It's just jumping that gap. And yeah, hoping to have more discussion about that today.
Next question, would you be willing to provide feedback on policy and program design as it relates to wind energy? So a lot of people willing to provide feedback on policy and program design? Okay, thank you, everybody. That was the end of the survey. And we should be able to share the results of that survey if anyone's interested after the presentation. So now we'll move on to NRCan. Tom, I believe you're going to present.
I am. Are you bringing the deck up or am I?
I don't have it, so I hope
Okay.
you are.
I better have it. All right, let me, just give me a moment. Unless Ryan can do it.
I can.
Is it easier for you to do it or is it easier for me? I don't know if I'm a presenter. If you could do it, Ryan, that would be easier.
Okay, give me one moment. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Hopefully that's looking good.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, the past and present funding, I'm just kind of thinking actually about that last question you had up there. And I think, you know, funding entirely focused on wind is probably not, I mean, I can't see why we would do it completely just based on wind, recognizing that some of the similar challenges exist with wind across other renewables when we're talking about broad rollout, deployment, and so on. But in terms of the past, the wind technology roadmap, 2008, I think, it's dated, it's no longer relevant. I'd be curious to know if people are interested in a roadmap, but my sense is I don't think we need one per se, but certainly open to suggestions around what that might look like if people think it makes sense. The Pan-Canadian Wind Integration Study that CanWIA led a number of years ago was funded through OERD, through the Eco Energy Innovation Initiative. And WestNet, of course, as people are well aware, existed. And I think, just again, looking back at Lucas's comment, I think, the opportunity for a WestNet 2.0 is unlikely, just given the state of funding in those different arenas. And so I think that drives home the value of this group. And I think as it materializes, as you find your legs, so to speak, I think that it will provide a tremendous amount of value to help ensure that programming is aligned with where industry is saying the needs are greatest. For those of you who aren't aware, the Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways program is up and running. It's a continuous intake. Much like the former WIPI, it's a continuous intake, although in this case, it's a capital expenditure program and not a production incentive. So the departmental website is where you should go for that. If you can't find it, let me know or let Ryan know, or any of the other NRCan employees that are on here today. They'll be able to point you to that. SREP's website. It's nearly $1 billion over 4 years. It's a massive program. It touches on pretty much every element between supply and flexible load, electric vehicles, and so on. There's a few caveats associated with it. The central one is the ability to provide grid services must be part of those projects, and that is all defined within that website. So I'd encourage you to go and take a look for that. Research networks are eligible for grant funding, but there are no current opportunities. So if you keep the pressure on, I think that ensures that there will be at least folks internal to know that there is value, we do have a need, and hopefully, potentially in the future, if that need is well justified through the continued existence of this forum and this group and potentially others, maybe we can make a good case internally and secure some funding for that. If you're not aware, the Clean Growth Hub is out there, and that is an interesting group of folks, because what they do is they help connect the funding needs and the funding asks that individual organizations have with the federal programs that are out there to help advance clean tech projects. And as the name implies, clean growth is all related to renewables and smart grid storage and so on. Next slide, please, Ryan. As I alluded to, the planning for future programming is something we are continuously doing. So understanding what those priorities are, understanding where your needs are critical. The in-house innovation systems analysis tool was an effort that Melinda and a number of my colleagues lifted off to help, as I said here, just figure out where those R&D opportunities are, what role Canada can play, where the gaps are, and help align those needs with research efforts. It is complete at this point, and we'll be reaching out to probably a number of folks that are on this call and others to have your views expressed on it, to feed into it, and to help better understand as you look to that top bullet where that internal and external programming needs to point. So we'll get to that through the Canadian Wind Energy Research Network and CanRIA. Next slide, please. We used to convene technical advisory groups, but that is no longer the case. And I recall a number of years ago, Ryan and I think Scott was there too. We were sitting with Cynthia Handler and brought this idea forward of the Wind Research Network. And she was very enthusiastic towards it, pointing out as well that these technical advisory groups were no longer active. And yet they provide a wealth of insight and information, I think, for all parties, for them to understand on industry side where government is thinking, and likewise government to understand where industry is thinking, to get information out there to help everybody understand where respective needs are. So this Canadian Wind Research Network was brought forward to Cynthia as an idea, and she immediately acknowledged the value that it would provide. So we at OERD and throughout CanMet Labs and other government departments within NRCan that are in the clean growth or in the clean energy sector view this type of group and potentially others that are out there as extremely valuable to ensure, as I said, that we're doing where we're acting where the needs are greatest. You provide a host of collective experts that can help respond and provide insight to policy and program questions. I'm happy to see on one of the questions that Marianne had that people are interested, and we can talk about that as to what that might look like. I think a number of you are involved with the Energy Modeling Initiative and what that is attempting to do. And I see some synergies between the research that is being viewed here as being important and is being tabled and shared, and where that EMI effort is. EMI is around electrification. It is looking at a broader systems analysis. If you're interested in understanding it, reach out to Ryan or myself. Better yet, Stephen Wong, who is very much involved in that, and we can link you with that program. There is a website. If you Google Energy Modeling Initiative, you'll find it. I think Rupp is involved, and Lindsay. I know Madeline McPherson and Normand are also part of that. Phil had, just looking at that last bullet, there are a number of R&D gaps and needs, and I think the work that Phil was doing was to kind of gather that and to ruminate on where those are and what effort might be needed to overcome those is an extremely valuable task. And it links back to the ISAT work, and it links back to even questions that EMI are looking to answer and inform. And I think that if we can continue to do that on a regular basis, to ensure that we're nimble and that we're responding to where those needs are, I think we'll all be better for it. So that wraps it up, Marianne and Ryan. I think that's the end of the slideshow. Or sorry, that's the end of the slide deck. But happy to take any questions or have a discussion. And I see thank you to whoever, to Melinda, to post the EMI link.
Thanks, you, Tom. I just wanted to also point out, like, thanks, Melinda, for posting all the links, and we can make this chat available after the presentation. But yeah, Ryan, did you want to add?
I did just wanted to add a few very brief comments from the CanMed perspective. So we're really happy with the participation this year. I think there's tremendous potential for this network to create value and impact, and we'd like to see it grow. So at this point, we're prepared to support WECAN financially to continue as the chair for the next 2 years, at least to start, to cover expenses related to hosting and organizing, whether that ends up being virtual, hybrid, or in person. And then, as Tom mentioned, we certainly see a role connecting researchers both within the network and to different existing research, government, utility, industry networks. And as a member of the International Energy Agency, IEA Wind TCP Technology Collaboration Program, we also welcome discussions with anyone who wants to get involved with the IEA research tasks on behalf of Canada. And we can use this network to disseminate more information that is raised through the IEA Wind Executive Committee. And then certainly we intend to help further advance the network by raising awareness about funding opportunities from new and ongoing programs, and to help facilitate preparation of joint proposals by Wind Network members. Back to you, Marianne.
Thanks, Ryan. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan or Tom? We have a couple of minutes for questions.
Can you expand a little bit on ISAT and where that's at? Is this, is there any public information on this one yet?
If Melinda is okay for me to put her on the spot, I'm going to ask Melinda to respond to that. And if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sure, yeah, no, there is no public information yet. We are in the process. We'll probably put out an RFP to ask for a service provider to help us with the stakeholder engagement process. And at that time, I guess we'll determine how we're going to reach out to people. So it may or may not be through our website, but that would be when. So in terms of time frame, I think we're hoping to do that in the next couple of months.
Melinda, can you briefly just cover, so the technologies were quite wide ranging. They obviously included wind, onshore and offshore.
Yes.
The goal was around research and gaps.
Not just research. So the scope was quite large. You're right. In fact, it covered renewable power and heat. So anything under renewable power and heat. And it was to identify not just the R&D gaps, but also any sort of policy and regulatory gaps, as well as any market gaps. More specifically, the role that we could play both internally in the government through our programs, as well as how we could support external RD&D. So very, very broad. And yeah, we completed the first stage, but we're now in the next stage.
So keep your eyes peeled and your ears open for that fill. I expect CanRIA will be certainly one of the primary stakeholders that we go to.
Yes, we actually have a stakeholder list compiled, and CanRIA is definitely on there. And we could probably get some help on that as well.
It sounds really great. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So maybe what we'll do on that is Phil, maybe we could have a discussion with you offline about that stakeholdering process. And at that point, I think Melinda will know whether we've got the right people on, and Phil can help us identify if we don't,
Yep, for sure.
who we might consider adding.
Yeah, that would be great.
Are there any other questions for Ryan or Tom? Okay, maybe we'll move on to Phil McKay from CanRIA, who's going to talk about bridging the gap between research and industry.
We'll give it my best shot here. And I don't have a ton of content. I do have a little bit to put on screen here, but what I'd actually like to do is have more of a conversation, if we can, because I will be the first to admit that I don't think I have a good handle on how to do this, how to align industry and research. I do see a few names that I don't recognize on the list here. So if you don't know us, we're the National Association for Wind, Solar Energy Storage in Canada. So we're a merge of CanWEA and CanSIA, if you're familiar with those organizations, and coming up on 1 year next month of the new association. So I've got a few things to show. I've had a few conversations already with some people about how do we even begin to crack this nut. I myself have been around the academic circles a little bit, although not for long, I don't think, or where I had a chance to do some of the work in the research world at the University of Windsor under Dr. Caraveau, and then also have spent some time at WeCan in that kind of bridging the gap role and applying strain gauges, but to commercial products, so we could collect data to do research on a commercially operating wind farm, that kind of thing. And then now working on the industry side and hearing what a lot of our members are saying, and at times just trying to pull teeth, right? Trying to figure out what are the needs actually. Why is this so hard to talk about sometimes, and why aren't we getting the attention around the topics that we're talking about in the industry forums in the research world? So what I tried to do is put a list together, and Marianne, can you see my screen okay? Can you see these 3 columns? Okay, great. Just some initial ideas from some initial conversations. I'm hoping you can tell me today if I'm missing anything critical here between this gap between research and industry. So I've kind of grouped them into 3 columns. I don't know what's helpful for me anyway, maybe not for you, maybe I'm missing a column altogether. But on the first far left there, funding and resources, obviously we always want more money. It would always be nice to have more priority funding from government, from private companies that are looking to advance their business. What I want to focus on this column, though, is the fact that especially going forward, maybe not in some of the legacy projects that we have fairly thin operations budgets for these sites. And I'm going to talk exclusively about wind here, but not all of this is exclusive to wind. This is also solar and storage in many regards as well. And I think we need to be upfront about this. It came up in the chat as well earlier. We aren't designing commercial scale wind turbines in Canada necessarily. Certainly there's some feedback that comes from the Canadian market back to Denmark, Germany, US, wherever, but we're not necessarily starting with a blank page and designing the next 6 megawatt onshore machine. The focus where we have most of our resources are in operating assets, as well as the development of new ones. And you see that reflected in a lot of the topics that were highlighted again at the beginning of this call around forecasting, resource assessment, climate change, that kind of thing. We also talk about asset management and that. But I just want to put it on the table here that this is what the industry, from my point of view, is talking about, are the operating assets. efficiencies. 1% more performance here, 0.5% over here. How do you even measure 0.5% in performance increase? These are the kinds of things that we're talking about. On that middle column, and this is where I think it actually, I put it in the middle on purpose, because I think this fills in a bit of the bridge that we are needing here. Just lack of prioritization and time from industry. So we're managing day to day, don't have time to really think about your 4-year PhD project, that kind of thing. Misaligned objectives between academia, government, industry. So a lot of times I think that industry approaches a research project like, okay, so I can do this instead of a consultant. Well, no, this isn't a consulting work. We're not looking to solve a problem in 6 months and provide a solution. We're looking to really move the needle on how we understand these assets and what we can do with them. Misaligned timelines, again, speaks to that thing. Okay, if I've got 6 months of funding, if I don't have something to show corporate by the end of that, then I'm going to lose my funding. And yet these research projects take a long time, rightfully so, because they're so technically involved. Negative past experiences. This has come up, like burned a bridge somewhere along the way, or a project failed, or you went down a road to explore something and found that there was nothing down that road, part of research. But that's the taste that's left in the mouth of the corporate funder. I think we also have a little bit of lack of vision. I'll put my hand up and say that too. We get consumed with the day-to-day of just making sure we're generating clean power. Certainly we get really pulled into the policy challenges that we're up against, trying to deploy new wind and solar and storage. And then I've noticed in my time in the industry that certain champions do arise here and there, people who are willing to get beaten up and kicked around and really slug through the tough stuff to get to where we want to be. And so how do we inspire those people and pull them out of the woodwork, because they are the exception, not necessarily the rule. This last column, I won't get into too much, just to overlay this idea that there are circumstantial pieces that make this not work. So sometimes a global pandemic happens and your research program gets cut because you can't get on site, because the money got tight, that kind of thing. Maybe you had a key industry contact. You built a relationship with somebody, you were getting somewhere, and then they moved to another company, they retired, whatever, and then I don't have a phone number even to call within my research partner. Yeah, so just some circumstantial stuff that I don't think we can do anything about. That's really an individual situation that we can't necessarily do collectively. So I'll pause there. I have some other questions that might help us have a bit more of a conversation. But from what you see here, are there things missing on this list that, from your experience, you would say is something we could include? And I'm not afraid to pick on names as well.
Hey, Tom, sorry, Phil, it's Roop.
You remember me?
Yeah. No, what happened was I was just complaining about Tom, and that was on my mind. I was just complaining to Lindsay about something Tom had said. So my apologies.
Fair enough.
Roop, you're opening the door, buddy.
I know. No, Phil, I think you did a really nice job here with this summary. I think the other piece that, and this is probably obvious to everybody, maybe, but the dance partners have to meet too. That's the other thing, and then I guess that's what this network is supposed to help with. But all of these things are challenges, and then you also have to find personalities that will work together well.
Yeah.
So and regrettably, that's not going to happen over a Zoom call. That's going to happen when Tom Levy and Scott Harper are holding court in a rotating interview session at some bar. So but that's such a key part of this. The in-person part of meeting people and locating potential partners for projects, both on the academic and the industry and the government side.
Yeah.
That all has to happen. That's all I'll say.
I'll let you. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Gareth. Yeah.
No, I can jump in on a couple of the points. I mean, this is some of the stuff we're looking at clear a lot of, how we access funding for our research and everything else. So I just say, look, funding wise, there's never been as much money in the market as there is right now. I mean, there is more money flying around for these topics. The world's changed even in the last 6 months. I mean, there is more funding from government, from private entities, from whatever it is, and there's ever been. This is the best opportunity to get research done than we've ever had. What there needs to be, though, is a very clear view of what is success that you can point back over when we've done things in the past. Like, look at what we've done with the projects that we talked about, the roadmaps there. You look at, like, come back obviously from the UK background here, my accent, like look at where projects have been spent there. And quite often when you point back at them, they didn't move the industry forward. And I just think that we have to be, like, brutal at times about what we're looking to achieve in the market. But I would say the funding and resources are there right now. I would say the motivation and the leadership side, I would just really emphasize that there's very little expertise in our industry compared to how big we are right now. That you go back to how many folks have got 10, 15 years running wind farms and understand how it impacts financing, it impacts insurance, impacts all these other players. Getting folks into your company, which then impacts doing research really effectively, is really, really hard on that side. But again, like, come back just being very open and transparent. So when we come back to, like, committees like in this, or deciding research decisions, we have to get the right folks in the room. So it isn't the government that's setting the agenda. It isn't the university setting the industry, but it's industry. Like, the big thing that's moved the wind industry in Canada has been what's happened in Europe, what's happened in China, what's happened elsewhere. We have to get those industry players in these groups, in these committees, and, like, on the steering committee here, and the grid operators as well, who are going to integrate all this wind. So I just come back to kind of Roop's point of getting folks together. We really, I think the biggest thing that the government can be doing is to facilitate that, to make sure we've got the resources to get those folks at those meetings, having those conversations to kind of drive it forward there.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Gareth? Let's see if I can form this. You mentioned kind of lack of experience. Fair enough. I think it is growing. We do have some anchors in the industry who.
And that isn't a comment for Canada. That's just a comment globally. Yeah,
I'm wondering if that's step one to creating these kind of these people who would be willing to sit on a steering committee, who would be willing to participate in that. And that's maybe the challenge that we have, that we can't accelerate time. So you have somebody who's been managing a site for 2-3 years, has some ideas, but might not have the confidence to say, I know what the research networks in Canada need to do. They're going to sit in the background and wait to see what happens. So I don't know if that's true necessarily or all the time, but I don't know if that's your experience as well.
Yeah, I think getting those folks on, quite often it's the CEOs or the CTOs. It's those senior folks who've gone through it and seen what the impact is, and have the keys to the funds as well. It's getting engaged, making sure that the research is aligned to their kind of company long-term aims of what they want to achieve. They're the big, like I want to say the Mike Crawleys at Northland, or whoever it is, like getting folks who can really impact things. May not be a technical lead there, but we need to make sure that those senior voices are in this discussion.
Right. Yeah, I'm keen to hear anybody from the university space. I want to speak up here as well.
Hi, Phil. I don't have anything really to add to what you've said. I just want to thank you very much for taking the time and effort to put these thoughts together, because I think this is really essential to do to move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see if it's helpful in the long run, but just trying to get people talking.
Lucas, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Lucas.
I think one of the principal challenges is that it seems to me wind runs in a boom and a bust cycle virtually in all jurisdictions of Canada. And so certainly from an academic perspective, we look for continuity for both our students and our research programs to know that that industry partner is going to be there a couple of years down the road as the outcomes of the research become tangible and commercializationable, if that's a word.
Sure.
And I think that's always been a difficulty, certainly for me here in Nova Scotia. We've had many partners move into the region, which was great and exciting. And then they either left the region or possibly went bankrupt or whatever else. So I think that that's been a serious research industry alignment issue. And it is exacerbated by the policies that have been put in place by both the federal and the provincial governments, again, that achieve great things. You know, you come out with a program and says, hey, we're going to do all this renewable energy or something like that. We have this big boom cycle, but then it all dries up. And so as an example here in Nova Scotia right now, 6 or 7 years ago plus, we put all our eggs in one basket waiting for Muskrat Falls to come on in Labrador and deliver electricity to us over a couple of links into Nova Scotia. And that energy was supposed to flow years ago now, and it's that far behind schedule. But I have literally been sitting in meetings for years where people keep saying to me, just wait until we see that come on, then we'll know what we have, and then we can do a new policy and a new program. Well, I've been waiting for years now, and that's certainly been a challenge as well. So I would say strong alignment in policy from both the federal and the provincial jurisdictions that seek continuity, sort of like the shipbuilding idea here in Nova Scotia right now, where they're looking to create long-term marine shipbuilding value for Nova Scotia that's not boom and bust. If we could apply that to renewable energy, I think that would be very advantageous for the region, but will facilitate or work its way down to research and industry alignment, certainly for academia. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And I guess you see why, I mean, sometimes you'll see a consortium pop out like the Year 21 project, which the more partners, the better. Still doesn't always work if everybody feels the impacts of that boom bust. Everybody goes together. Yeah, great comment. Anybody want to add to that or add something new? Go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, I find a lot of the time when you approach industry from the academic side, it's I guess a not understanding what academia can do usefully for them. So if there's ways of better highlighting success stories or something where I guess industry could better understand kind of how universities work a little bit, but then projects that actually gave useful value, I think would be really useful, because that's usually when you go into meetings with companies and it's like, well, what can we possibly do that helps your bottom line kind of thing, but if they can see some other tangible things, that would really help.
And would you say, and not just for you, but anybody on the line, that there is a general misunderstanding between what research academia can do and what industry is asking for? Is it misaligned? Am I barking up the right tree here, I guess is my question.
I think you're 100% correct. I think Karen's absolutely bang on about track record. I think the ability to demonstrate where value has been added and move the industry forward, that's both academia and government policies in the past, is a huge selling point to get folks involved.
I would echo that. This is Joshua from UBC. I would echo the same sentiment.
Okay, and Joshua, so if I'm trying to think practically here, education about what is possible, is that actually useful, or is that kind of trivial and it has to be kind of that one-on-one partnership? You got to build a relationship with the person. I'm wondering if the industry association even put together some material and say, here are the types of things, here, like even a list of wins, like here are the successful projects that we have had in the past decade, and notice what's similar about them. They all took this long, or they all address this type of issue, or that kind of thing. Is that even useful, or is it too specific? Do you need to get more specific than that?
I think maybe something like that would be beneficial, and particularly if they show the broad scope of types of collaborations that are possible. It could be like this, or it could be like that. It could be a small project involving a few partners, or it could be a larger project involving more partners that has a broader scope and a longer time frame. And I think that's one of the strengths of the industry academic collaboration, is that it can be what it needs to be in order to achieve the objectives. big or small, and broad or narrow, and we have that flexibility. I think Curran would agree. If the industry partner has a specific question that requires a specific type of approach, we can, like academics, we're elastic enough. We can expand or contract as needed to help address the kinds of problems. What I think is frustrating though is when there's what you mentioned already, Phil, when there's projects that come and then it seems like the interest is there's a lot of interest for a very brief time. We get the project started, and then 2 years in, we're starting to achieve some of the objectives, and the interest has gone away, or the interest is shifted from one topic to another.
Phil, can I add to what Joshua was saying?
Yeah, sure.
Timelines are really different between industry and academia. I think to punctuate that for Joshua here, my work falls into sort of two categories. One category is where the industry comes, they know we're valuable, and they know we're competent, they know we have excellent equipment, and they go, solve this for us and do it as fast as humanly possible. And we have a whole pile of stuff like that, but it requires that we be excessively nimble or extremely nimble and move as fast as we can to accommodate whatever it is they need an answer for right away. So, you know, I mean, we're signing a contract today, literally, and it's due before June 30th to work. I mean, go. That's one category. And we do that very successfully. And it falls into two groups. One is where there's a very defined deliverable. And the other one is where it's a little longer, but they realize they can ask us for all these short-term inside things that were never listed in the proposal or the contract. And then we do them for them. And they find that incredibly valuable. And so there's a person in the room next to me that's doing exactly that right now with umpteen sub-projects that were never even envisioned at the start. And they've realized how useful we are to them. So that's the one category. That's the industry-led contracts. There's the second category, often where they're leveraged with federal or provincial funds. And it kind of just rolls into a year or 2 year plus thing. And as academics, we absolutely love that because that will drive us forward with our graduate students. But I don't have a lot of industry coming to me by themselves saying that kind of time length will work for them. It's almost always when they've applied for and leveraged funding to big term dollars. So things like the Charge Forward Challenge and the Battery Challenge from NRCan and things like that really, really have an impact on us that way. But so timelines are everything for industry, and we have to figure out how to react to that. And that's a little tough, especially because I'll just be completely frank. The administration of my university is slow as molasses. And although I'm not supposed to, I often have to start research on something long before the contracts get signed just to be able to deliver on time. And the upper admin just struggles to figure that out for some reason.
Yeah, so I would just say that I think you're identifying almost a bit of an anomaly from what I'm hearing so far in that rapid turnaround. Here's a project to be with a clear deliverable, and the reason we're talking about bridging gaps and maybe educating industry is because of a possible lack of maturity that we have. So if oil and gas comes to you and they've got a century of time in, right? That's you probably are approached with a different set of to-dos. They understand, like you said, the value of what you can do and what's possible. They have the relationships. But in this case, we are talking about people who are newer to the industry, except for some. And so we have to bridge that gap. So I really appreciate the point. I think it does highlight something that's outside of the norm. Charles, you had your hand up at one point, if you want to comment before we run out of time.
Yeah, I completely agree with Lucas. I think as a college level research center, we kind of have the same, you could say, 2 level of project sizing, but there are a few things I wanted to point out. First one would be related to motivation to do R&D. And I think that operators may not be the one that are willing to take the more risks related to R&D. Because they already have a lot of cost, and you said, profit margins are low. So I think maybe the idea is also to expand what we think are potential partners for research. And so I think Garrett mentioned power utilities, which I think are very major players in Canada, which could provide support for R&D projects. And they can also, I think, have a bit more, they're willing to take more risk, especially on timeline aspects.
Sure.
And then there's communities as well. So that's something I think we've seen in the last few years, at least for us, is like municipalities or remote communities, they're willing to get involved in research. And so they could potentially be considered as partners as well. And yeah, I think the challenge of timeline is of course a key question when you talk with operators. I don't know that sometimes the convincing management is all the question about how much time is invested, what's the return on investment. And so I think maybe yeah, larger or different kind of partners could be willing to do R&D. I know at Nergica we've had some success with technology developers. So a wind turbine itself is a complex system. There's plenty of different systems in it. I think someone brought up the inverters, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I know like reliability of inverters is a major concern for the industry. One operator may not be willing to, tackle that by itself, but then a technology developer of an inverter that would, let's say, have funding from a consortium of the industry, that could be an approach. I know that there's an example of a consortium in the United States right now. It's called CFARS. And the idea is to use LiDAR instead of met masts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a consortium of operators. It's not one operator that said, okay, we'll look into how we can, remove met masts from the project development phase. It's a collection of operators. And there are some inputs from LiDAR technology developers as well. So I think that's technology developers that are looking to get to a market. It could be potential partners as well. And then there's a whole lot of things inside the artificial intelligence, data treatment, that could also be something. I think, Garrett's company is an example of it, where, they're willing to expand their market and develop, I would say, software-based services. And that's another, I would say, input for the industry.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm gonna close off here, Marianne, just so that we have time to finish. But I really appreciate that. Certainly, with as you're talking about with the operators partnering with other partners as well. Just naturally, these site operations are seasonally based. Like the weather is dominating their work cycle, and so they are working season by season, not with what we might see on a transmission line project, which could take 5 years, 10 years to pull off. So already there, the time frames are lengthening in the utility space. Yeah, so my takeaways here is, first of all, I think there's a lot of creativity out there, and I don't think that needs to be put in a column box list or anything like that. Let that happen, but maybe creating spaces for those connections to happen are very important. Educating industry on what research can do might be helpful, and certainly this group as a forum to get or kick some of these ideas around. So I know I'm a little bit scattered, but this is really helpful for me to pull out what's important to you. So Marianne, back to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. That was a really interesting discussion. We'll close this meeting now. It's a little bit over, but I felt like I didn't want to stop this discussion because it was so interesting. I'll be in touch with the links to this presentation and to the chat today. And then we'll be in touch with future steps for the research network as well. And if you have any ideas or comments, please feel free to contact me or anyone on the steering committee. And we're gonna see what the next steps are moving forward. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks everyone for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.